Okay, welcome back. We're going to dig into the 17th Amendment, try to evolve your constitutional knowledge. Again, most people on the street I talk to, they think they know the Constitution because they believe in limited government. They've never read it. It's kind of like a lot of believers say they love the Bible, but they just don't read it. It's the same mindset. So we need people to actually read the Constitution. But even if you read it, there's some amendments that sound like common sense, but you really need to break down and go, well, why did they change it from what the founders intended? So the 17th Amendment is rarely talked about, but is so critical to structural control of the monetary, or I should say the budget of the federal government. So let's correct some fallacies in the general knowledge of the marketplace. So most of the textbooks lie to you, and you grow up learning there's three branches of government: the judicial, executive, and legislative. The reality is there's 5 branches of government. So the legislative can really and should be looked at as 2 different branches, because the House of Reps primarily was designed to have a different boss than the United States Senate. So I would say those are 2 different bodies. You can keep it one if you want, but they really have distinct purposes that should be recognized. The 5th branch of government would be the states. The states had power, and the states were mission critical into checking our federal government. So if you watch my last video on Article 5, that's part of their role, is to check the federal government. That's why it was a failure by our unicameral to address. But I'm going to talk about how it was originally designed and why it was better than how it's designed now. So let me call out the start of this. I'm going to fail in my constitutional charge of promoting the arts. What I'm about to draw is actually degrading the arts, so my apologies to the art community. But here's how the founders designed it. We had the people, just people over here, and there's 2 governments. There was the federal government and the state government, so we have unicameral. And then we have the House of Reps. And I didn't put the U.S. Senate for a reason. The 17th Amendment gave the control of the U.S. Senate to the people to vote on, which sounds good. I mean, I'm a populist, so you think I'd love it. The reality was the states were designed to be a check on the federal government, and they elected the United States senators. So a simple test, you can go out and ask 500 people on the street, how did the founders design the U.S. senators to be elected? 499 of them will say, well, the people elect the United States senators. And most of you probably think that right now that are listening. The reality was the states elected them. And let's talk structurally why that was important. So the people can get upset about a variety of things, or they need a bunch of things. So they would run to the House of Reps at a federal level if the issue is germane to the federal government, and say, we need to get this done. And so the House of Reps, every 2 years, very close to the people, they may propose legislation that would go to the Senate. Meanwhile, we're also electing our state representatives at the unicameral. So right now we'd have 49 representatives. Who do you think is more responsive to the needs? It's people closer to home. So the unicameral is very responsive to our needs. And then our House of Reps, if there's an issue that the federal government needs to be addressed, we can talk to them. Now, I want you to focus on taxation, because a lot of the Constitution was about taxation and how it would technically flowed. So one of the media members asked me when I was in favor of abolishing the IRS, like, well, who's going to collect taxes? That's moronic. Someone's got to do it. And I answered her, but she was still puzzled. The states are designed to collect our taxes, because the states were designed by our founders to transfer our taxes to the federal government, a big intermediary in between. And we'll talk about why that's important. So I'm going to erase this here. And let's go the unicameral. We're going to slide it over here. And the Senate. Now, if I was good at the unicameral and I had my 48 peers, let's say They thought I was the right person for the job. Well, I'd had experience at the unicameral. They liked how I generally brought consensus together. They liked the bills I supported, the wisdom I brought to the table. My peers would elect me as U.S. Senator, and I was responsible not to the population, but I was responsible to the state, which sounds like, well, you're cutting the people out. That doesn't sound good. Well, who has control of my peers in the legislature? It's the people. And the state legislature, most politicians are motivated by power. Well, the states are no different. More power for those politicians, more power at the federal level. I mean, the whole design of the Constitution was to limit the factions that happen so the people and the liberty of the people would be protected. So if a U.S. Senator responds to the state power and not the people, do you think the U.S. Senator, if it's inclined to hold their position, is going to vote for more tax increases that need to come from the unicameral? Again, they don't have to go to the people for the taxes. They got to go to the unicameral. No. And so it creates a structural difference. So most people don't know that all the revenue bills, all the tax bills were designed to come out of the House of Reps. The Senate was never to design revenue and taxation bills. And a small tangent for you, most Republicans ignorantly argue that Obamacare is an unconstitutional type bill, which I agree with them, it is. But they never argue the fact that Obamacare originated in the Senate. And the Republican conservative Chief Justice Roberts, who upheld Obamacare, again, another establishment Republican, cites that, well, Obamacare is constitutional because it's designed to tax or a levy. Now, I'd say it's a market-based system. But no one ever called him out on the fact that that bill originated in the Senate. And our Constitution called, if it is a tax, to start from the House. So that's an interesting argument on Obamacare for you that no one ever brings up, but I thought you'd like to know. But we call those bills now gut and replace that come out of the U.S. Senate that are revenue bills. This is more constitutional recovery we need to keep those bills in the House. And then I would advocate for the abolishment of the 17th Amendment and get our senators back responding to our state, not the people. When you have two people pleasers, you're going to get a million things passed. And guess what happens? Spending goes through the roof. When you have a counterbalance with the state who's inclined to keep their power down because state power matters, you get a lot less passage. And what you really end up with, and most people don't know this in the Constitution, is you really have 20 core responsibilities of the government that were designed to, quote, promote the general welfare in the preamble. They would focus on those 20 areas, and a lot was left up to the states. So let's talk through taxes. So again, as we've talked about, taxes come from the people to the state, which then lump sums it into one payment to the federal government. If you have 50 different governments, or 13 at the time of the founding, having to collect taxes for the one powerful entity, it gets a lot harder. And by the way, let's take our unicameral, 49 full-time people in tune with government. If their job was to monitor what the U.S. senators were passing, they have the time to do that if it was a full-time job. The citizens, there's a few like me that get into it, but most have no time to really get into the details. And this is how all the loopholes get passed and all the pork that goes into those bills. And predominantly, if you had 50 factions of states, do you think all the pork for the one-offs for this little state are going to get through? No. We're going to pass a lot less. We're going to keep spending down. So this is a structural reform that we need to change, is get the people out of control of the U.S. Senate, get them responding to the wise leaders that we put into the state house, and the people retain control of the House. And what you're really doing is creating checks and balances to control spending, but way more counteractive elements to keep people persuaded to power checked in different areas. So I think it's a huge structural reform. So we're going to get to the last piece on the Federal Reserve. But again, controlling the spending was designed better pre-17th Amendment. We talked about Article 5 to bring control of spending. I'm going to talk about my last structural reform in the next video.